Friendship, for example, is a real gift.
It's an insane world. In it there is one sanity, the loyalty of old friends.
You're the best friends anybody ever had.
Alone, bad, friend, good.
Bubba was my best good friend. I had to make sure that he was okay.
Friendship and family, these are the things that matter.
Can we just become best friends?
Yep.
Touch my friends again and I'll blind you. Thanks, Mike. You're my best friend here.
Lose one friend, lose all friends, lose yourself.
We ride together, we die together. Bad boys for life.
That's what friends are for, right?
Friends? Louis, I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
If you're not over here in 15 minutes, you can find a new best friend. You've been saying that since the 5th grade.
Welcome to the I Am Your Friend podcast. I'm your host, Aiden Licker. Thank you so much for tuning in yet again. Another exciting week with no guest. That's going to happen. You know, I don't know a lot of people here. And I also get scared to reach out to people because I have imposter syndrome. You know, it's difficult to feel confident in what I'm doing. But we're doing it, you know, and that's what this is all about. I also realize that I have new listeners since I've started back up of my friends in New York and maybe other people I've met along the way who might not know what the podcast is. And I feel like I should kind of recenter to what I'm setting out to do here. You know, I Am Your Friend is a podcast that I originally started with really no intention other than I had a lot of things on my mind that I wanted to just speak about to see if anybody was interested in hearing, I don't know, what I had to say. Not necessarily like from an angle of pushing my opinions, but more from like, hey, is anybody else stuck in this like thought loop, you know? And I obviously listen to a lot of podcasts, which is why I wanted to start it. I love listening to podcasts, but most of the podcasts I listen to are from like successful people. And so my angle was like, what if it was just, I'm a normal guy who's just trying to figure my life out, and other normal people who are also trying to figure their life out could have a voice to, I don't know, make people not feel so alone in this weird thing we call life, you know? So I eventually landed on calling it a coming of age podcast, which eventually ended me up on some list of like top coming of age podcasts, which was cool. And I was stoked for that. I have no idea like what credibility that list was, but I was excited to be featured on it. And it was reassuring to know that I'm not wasting my time here. A thing I've been thinking about lately is I love being creative and I love expressing myself. It is what I would consider my purpose for existing, and what gets me out of bed every day. It's what my brain is always thinking about. And it is great to just do it for the sake of doing it, and I've definitely found peace in that. But there is part of me that's like, wouldn't it be awesome though if I worked a little harder and tried to make this like my life so I could, you know, do this full time and be able to like live off of that? That would be cool. So I think about all of the things that I love doing, whether it's performing music or doing comedy or podcasting, amongst many other things. It's hard to pick one, you know, but I know, or at least I believe in myself enough that if I would focus on just one and like put all of my eggs in that basket and really work hard towards that one thing, I believe that I could be successful at doing one of these things. But I find it very difficult to pick one. As soon as I start focusing on one, I think of like a million reasons not to. And then I kind of get in this like grass is greener mindset and being like, oh yeah, well I should have just done the other one, you know, where it's like, I've been thinking about trying to record music again. I mean, I'm recording a podcast into the same equipment I would use to record music. And I have a lot of songs that I've written over the last 3 or so years that have never seen the light of day. And I think it would be fun as a project to just like work on those and eventually put them out, but even as a way of just working on something that I'm creating, you know, like I want to get better at like music production and those kinds of things. So it's like, but I have these songs written, so why not just start recording them? And then, you know, I think, well, I got to set everything up, and then, you know, I'm going to do it. And then this like self-doubt kicks in. That's like, I don't know, like it's probably not even going to be that good. And then I hear a song that some 17-year-old made completely on their own that just like blows everything I've done out of the water. And it's like, well, you know, this is sad if I'm still trying to do that. And that sucks. That sucks that happens. Self-doubt is very hard to battle. And I think that's been the thing that I struggle with most since moving here, which I think is expected, you know, moving to a new place, not knowing a lot of people and kind of having to start all over, especially when you're pushing 30. I mean, I'm like super proud of myself for pushing those thoughts off to get here, but it's still a tough battle all the time to try to navigate those things. But we're doing it. And yeah, I don't know. I really think podcasting is, I mean, it's the easiest one, I will be honest, compared to the other ones I want to do. It's really only a few hours of my time out of the week. And it's like, I'm very busy, you know, I work a lot, and that takes up most of my time, but I like my job. And then I also like to have a social life, you know, and there's that famous meme that's like the triangle, and it's like, you can pick one, of these three things, or pick two of these three things. That's like, I don't know, a job you like, a social life, and I don't know what the third one is, but for my sake here, we'll call it creative endeavors or pursuing your passions. And it's hard to find a balance in those three things. But I'm doing my best. And I have been feeling more inspired lately, for sure, to try to do these things, to try to pursue these things. So I feel like podcasting is the thing I want to get more towards, but I need to start taking it seriously and believing in myself more and get out of imposter syndrome and try to get myself into the mindset of like, this is what I want in life, and you only get one life to live, as corny as it sounds. And it would really suck if things, it's hard. I really think is like the key to a lot of these things is like, you have the time to do it. This is the time to do it. Cause it's like, one day I could, you know, I don't know, I'm 28, right? I could easily, there are people my age who are married with children and don't have time to do anything. And like, so I have the time to do it. I don't have those kinds of things that would be holding me back or I don't know, making it more difficult to be able to do these kinds of things. So it's like, I try to focus on that. That's like, that's the reason, that's the push I need. But for some reason, it's so hard to get myself to want to do things. And then I spend so much goddamn time on my phone. Anybody else? It's tough out here. I am a chronically online human being. I wish I wasn't. Always have been. And that's something that is, I mean, I probably have talked on here a ton about the struggle that I have of like getting off of social media. But it's the easiest way. It's like the easiest thing ever to occupy my brain when there's any sort of downtime, you know? It happened to me yesterday. I got up early-ish, not as early as I would like to. Got up early-ish and did some stuff around the apartment, and then I did my grocery shopping routine that I typically do on Saturdays, which is like farmer's market, Trader Joe's, maybe hit the pharmacy for toiletries of things that I might need. And that's like multiple trips throughout the day. But it's good. It feels productive. I listen to podcasts, spend some time in myself. I get out of the house, you know, get my steps in, get out, get some vitamin D a little bit. And and I get all those things done, and I get back here, and I have this like burst of energy, and I'm like, oh, okay, maybe I have the day, I have nothing going on. Maybe I can set up some recording equipment and I can work on some songs or something, you know? And then next thing I know, I'm on the couch scrolling through social media for 2 hours. And then because it's November, it's dark out at 4 p.m., which is honestly rude. Okay. Been trying to battle the seasonal depression this year. I was explaining to some of my friends about this, that now that it's getting colder, it's getting darker out earlier. Obviously the worst, right? But there is something that is like pulling me away from it, which is it's reminding me of when I moved here, which I moved here in January, at the beginning of January of last year, or this past year, I guess. And it was that's a very exciting time in my life that I think about. And I'm coming up on a year since then. So the like dark and the cold are kind of like pulling that into my brain and being like, you've almost been here a year and you've made it. And this is reminding you of a super exciting time last year when you first moved here. So that's nice that I have this little bit of a loophole to like avoid seasonal depression, but it's still sneaking its head in and trying to pull me down. So I've been trying to battle that a little bit too. Tell you what doesn't help is just sitting on your couch and scrolling social media, especially when there is a catastrophe happening in another part of the world that seems to be all over my entire algorithm, because that's the type of person that I am. So, you know, trying to figure that all out. Anyway, when I think about podcasting, there's a lot of creators in New York that I really admire and look up to, and part of me wants to just like hit them up, just slide into the DMs and be like, hey, I'm a very novice New York creator who just moved here, and I'm trying to, you know, build my platform a little bit. I really admire what you do. It would be cool if you would be a guest on my podcast, kind of thing, right? Not expecting anybody to say yes, because why would they come on like a smaller creators podcast? But the creators I follow seem to be going for a similar thing that I am, which is kind of like pushing like a genuine, authentic, real shit kind of thing, if you will. So I feel like they might, but I don't know. But I also don't have the confidence to even hit them up. I also think about like from a business perspective, from like a, I don't know, marketing standpoint of like, what do my profiles look like right now? And I realize I do not do a great job at promoting this podcast. I just like post one thing to my story because I claim to not have the time to do the other things. So, which is me making excuses, but I want to try to like rebrand my actual social media profiles, put in some time into doing that, and try not to get distracted by the feeds in the meantime. So you're going to start seeing me hopefully post a bunch more clips from the podcast and me promoting the podcast to Maine, if you will, and try to build some sort of like brand around it so that if I do reach out to people, will click on my profile and see, oh, this is a person who, this is what they do, you know, because right now it's just me like performing gigs, and it's like, oh, well, how do we even know what this podcast is? And that, again, all goes back to self-doubt and imposter syndrome, which is something that I battle with all the time, which is so silly. But comparison is the thief of joy, as they say. Trying to find a little bit more self-belief here. And again, the worst place to look for that is through social media. And that's where I'm at currently. I feel like that was overall kind of a negative thing, but I promise it's not. I'm looking forward to how things are going to progress here as we get towards the end of the year. Yeah. Anyway, how are y'all doing? I love getting to that point where I run out of thoughts and I just say that. And I hope that people respond out loud. Just before I started recording this, I was doing some things around my apartment. And I watched the new episode of SNL with Timothy Chalamet and Boy Genius. And it was so good. And I've been watching SNL a lot more this year than I have in the past few years, because I feel like there was definitely a few years where I was like, this sucks. And I feel like part of that was during like the Trump years, which I started to think about. Somebody's got to do some like societal research on like American culture during those years, like 2016 up into the pandemic and then maybe through the pandemic, but just like what a weird time we lived through. It definitely felt like a glitch in the Matrix. I'm not saying that the times we're living in now are better, but there definitely was a weird reaction that we had in like mainstream culture to, and I don't know if it's a direct effect of the Trump presidency, but it just is like that whole time of like weird things, just a weird vibe all around of people like not knowing how to react to that. And I feel like we've adjusted as a culture for sure. And I feel like SNL is back to being good again and not feeling so, I don't know, like over the top and preachy, I guess. I don't know. I feel like just during those years, it was really weird. They had Alec Baldwin on as just like a regular to do Trump all the time, and it wasn't even that good. And I don't know. I thought that sucked. And I think it's back to being like good now. They're really going towards like the weird side of like almost like absurdist humor, which is funny because Tim Robinson tried doing that on SNL years ago and it like flopped. And it turns out he was just ahead of his time. Because yeah, like the Please Don't Destroy guys, which are all Nepo babies, which does suck to see, but I don't know. My view on Nepo babies is weird because it's like, obviously there's the whole, yes, they're like, they have the most privileged and the easiest path to get there. But that's not to say that they're not talented at what they do. And I'm talking like Nepo babies in general. And most of Hollywood, I feel like, is Nepo babies. Like I feel like it's very rare that you see somebody who is like a working class citizen like make their way to stardom anymore. I don't know if that ever happened, but part of me believes that there was a time that happened. And I just don't think that's the case anymore. And I feel the same about a lot of the arts. I realize that like a lot of artists that I like, I feel like really like hip hop is the only genre of music where it's like you can go from being poor to like being a superstar. Like I feel like everywhere else that just doesn't happen. And it makes sense. And I try to like remind myself of that when like I start doing the comparison thing and I'm like, man, why couldn't that be me kind of view of people I admire? And it's like, oh, well, they had, more advantages and they were more financially stable when they tried to go for it. I was talking to my friends last night who are comics, and, I've struggled with getting into the stand-up scene here in New York. One, because it's massive, and it's filled with a lot of nonsense, and you kind of have to like figure out how to navigate through a ton of bullshit to find like good people who are good comics that are actually interested in like pursuing the art form, not just like going viral on TikTok. And I don't know, it just really put a bad taste in my mouth. And also like a lot of the mics are hard to get to because they start at like a time that's like far from where I'm at when I work till what time I work till, and I realize like most of the comics I know like don't have like full-time gigs, and it's like, man, I wish I could like figure that out, like, but I need the full-time gig because I'm like in so much crippling debt from going to college. And that all of these factors of just like, I am just financially not stable enough to be able to like pursue a lot of these things. And I also understand that I'm saying that into a $300 microphone though. You know what I mean? Like there's I've invested in myself for sure into things like the equipment and stuff so that I could be able to do this. And I'm also paying all of this off over a long time because I figured out how to do that. Same thing with the camera that I'm looking into, you know? So I understand that I have like nice things, but I don't have like the financial freedom to be able to actually pursue the arts in the way that a lot of people do. And I also have realized that like as far as my student loan situation goes, I feel like I was perfectly privileged enough to get like the most fucked by that system and the timing of it as well, where it was like, so I got like FAFSA, right, which is the organization that like helps people with financial aid for going to college, right? So they basically told me to kick rocks because my parents were married and both had like full-time jobs where they made decent money. But they were not paying for my schooling because they could not afford to do that on their own because they also have other expenses and things, you know, and college is expensive. So FAFSA told me to kick rocks. And then I tried to get loans from the federal government and they were like, well, we will only give you this much because, again, your parents and stuff like that. And you're also a white man who's right-handed because apparently that matters, I think, as well. I couldn't get like any scholarships. I got one scholarship based on my like involvement in certain things in high school. That was a very small scholarship that I was grateful to get, and it was like an honor to receive that specific scholarship, but the actual money of it like didn't even cover my books for my first semester. And then I think the most frustrating part about it is like it was all things like out of my control, but I still couldn't afford it myself, nor could my parents, even though like on the books it says they can. And then like I was also like a not straight A, but like I was like a B+ A- student. And I worked really hard, and like I worked a job all through high school to be able to like pay for things to pursue like my creative pursuits, which like doesn't matter to anybody. And then double majored in college, worked the hardest I ever worked, graduated like top of my class, and just got nothing. Like, and then so I was forced to take out like private student loans, and I had to take out a different private loan for every year I was there. And because they're private loans, there's like no regulations on those things at all. So I was accruing interest on those loans while I was in school, and they were accruing at a 10% interest rate, which is really high. It cost me $60,000 to go to school, right? So that's like tuition and room and board because I went away to school because I wanted to go to school for music business, which I know is a ridiculous major to choose, but I ended up getting a job with it, so I feel differently about that now. But there's not a lot of money in that industry, and most jobs in the music industry do not care if you have a degree in the music industry, but I did learn a lot that I am now applying in my job, so it's like, I don't know, kind of a weird thing. $60,000 to go to college. By the time I graduated and, you know, that 6 months period ends after college, I was $94,000 in debt. And my payments to the private student loan company, Sally Mae, go fuck yourself, was starting out at $900 a month, and I was a waiter. So that was tough. And I remember calling them and being like, is there anything I can do to like get these payments lowered? Like, is there like an income based payment schedule or something? And she basically like laughed at me on the phone and was like, why do you think you won't be able to make these payments? And I was like, 'cause I'm a waiter. you know? And so I remember I made 1 month payment and then was like broke. And then I refinanced, which was a nightmare in itself. So I was able to refinance, consolidate all of those private loans. The consolidated loan interest rate changed to 6%. So still kind of high, but not crazy. And my payments went down to like $600 a month. And then I've been paying that for 6 years now. And I should have the whole thing of my private loans paid off by the time I'm 37. So that sucks, right? That sucks. And then the federal loans, I was doing an income-driven plan. Wasn't making a ton of money, so I was only paying like $100 a month for those. And then the pandemic hit, and those got frozen. And then Joe Biden, that guy ran on a platform of forgiving student loans, so I voted for him. And then he couldn't do that, I guess. And did the thing that Democrats always do where they're like, we tried, but the Republicans said no. I was like, all right, well, what else is there to do? And they're like, vote harder. You know, I'm really sick of that. Also, he's like fully committing a genocide right now and aiding in that, and like super proud of it. So I'm going to go ahead and not vote for him anymore. I was avoiding like, you know, talking about that side of things and like the political side of things because I don't want to like alienate anybody. And like, I understand everybody has their like personal views on things, and I don't, you know, I've kind of shifted away from trying to push my views onto people, and you can do whatever you want. But from my personal view, I see for a long time, a lot of these people in charge set out to do things that help people, and then they don't do them. And there's a lot of questions like, how are we going to pay for it, that people ask for certain things that would help people. But nobody asks that question when we give billions of dollars to fund two wars that we're not involved with, but are very much responsible for. And so it's like, oh, okay, so our tax dollars can't get us health care, but it can drop bombs on hospitals where there's children. Sweet. Thanks, Joe Biden. We won democracy now? We defeated fascism? Great. Super exciting. Awesome. So I'm not going to vote for that guy again. And you can do whatever you want. But I'm kind of at the point where I'm like, there's no amount of fear mongering that the Democrats can push onto me to be like, you got to vote for Joe Biden to stop this. I've been seeing online people talking about like Project 2025, which is like basically like the right's push into fascism. And it's like, yeah, but they're already doing that, you know, and we're not doing anything to stop it. Like the guys that we're putting in place have done nothing. Roe v. Wade is still overturned. The minimum wage has not changed. Marijuana is still fully illegal. We still don't have health care. The border wall is still being built. You know, like between, remember, all right, I was talking about the Trump era, and I know I went from student loans to this, but now you guys got me cooking, okay? So here's what's going to happen, okay? 2016, right? Donald Trump gets the presidency. Everybody's really scared. Bad things happen socially, right? A lot of rise in like hate groups and, you know, a lot of this incel freedom of speech type shit starts happening, right? And a lot of the culture war stuff starts. Well, not starts, but that's been happening, but really escalates. On the progressive side of things, we're really looking to like protect marginalized communities, and the right is trying to like undermine those communities. I don't know if undermine is the right word, but like attack those communities, and that seems to be what everything's about. And then in 2020, after the DNC, it was like, no, Bernie, again, we're not letting you guys do that. Here's Joe Biden. And we were like, God, this guy's a bag of milk, really old, spoiled milk. But I guess he wants to help gay people and black people. So that's better than the alternative, I guess. So we did that. And it felt right at the time. And now almost 4 years have passed again. And it's like, I don't know if we've made any progress. And Joe seems to be real like stoked about his position on things. And now that this, whatever you want to call war, conflict, genocide in the Middle East is going on, I think a lot of people are opening their eyes and realizing that this is all a game. The United States is just an empire, an imperialistic, capitalistic, power-hungry institution that is bad. We're the bad guys, you know? We are the empire, if you want to get Star Wars on it. And I don't think there's really any politicians, I shouldn't say any, but most politicians don't care about that and want to focus on like the dumb culture war stuff. And nobody's interested in actually helping people, you know, and that's really frustrating. And my whole thing is like the view on, you know, again, my personal buy-in here comes from a lot of like the student loan stuff and healthcare and things that it's just like, if I didn't have to worry about these things, I'd be chilling. Like I'd be living comfortably and not paycheck to paycheck, you know? And I realize, yeah, some of that is on me, right? I have expensive recording equipment to pursue my creative passions, right? Because that's the thing that keeps me going. Okay, you know, like I buy concert tickets every once in a while, okay, because I'm not just going to sit in my house and do nothing. I'm going to at least try to escape a little bit into the arts. All right, I'm doing my best, and either way, we could afford to give everyone healthcare twice over, and you should know that by now. And we don't, okay? At the end of the day, my statement is always, there is enough to go around, enough resources. We have enough resources on the planet to go around, and we have the technology to do it, to like distribute these things. But if nobody's making a profit, then they're not interested. So nobody's interested in solving problems. Everybody's in it to just like make something for themselves, all right? Which I get, okay? But it still sets, you know, the same precedent that I'm saying here is we have enough to go around, and every day we collectively make the active decision not to. Now, as soon as you start saying stuff like that, I already know what the response is from people who have the individualistic mindset that are just like, they're going to look at everything that you have and be like, well, why don't you give that away? Why don't you give that away? And it's like, because I really don't have anything, because I'm not talking about you and me here. You know, I'm talking about the guys who are pulling the fucking levers, the guys who sit in their ivory towers and start these wars to send their poor people off to so that they can make more money on it. You know what I'm saying? Those kinds of people. And it really comes down to class is what we all need to recognize, that nobody in your same class level is your enemy. It's just people who are getting information from different places, but we're all dealing with the same shit. And we all, I think, ultimately want the same things. And nobody who is in power is going to give that to us. So anyway, back to what I was saying. I have a bunch of student loan debt that I feel like I don't deserve to have. You know, and I get the viewpoint of, well, you were an adult who signed papers. You took the debt. That's your responsibility. Sure, I get that. But have you ever met a 17-year-old? Not the most responsible people on earth, you know? And also, like, again, I did everything I was supposed to do, you know? Like, I worked really hard in school. And then I chased my dreams because that's what I was told I could do. And that costs a lot of money, apparently, for some reason. And I worked really hard for that, too. And, like, was successful with it. I graduated. I did exactly what I sought out to do. And now I'm working in the industry I want to work in. And I'm struggling. I can't help but think that if I didn't do that, I would be in a better financial situation to be able to actually pursue the things I want to pursue, because I'd have a little bit more flexibility to do that. And that's hard. And you know what's funny is I've never met a single person who is in that same situation that I am, of like having this much debt in private student loans. I mean, I'm figuring out how to make ends meet, but it's tough. Also, going back to the federal loans thing that got paused during the pandemic, it came back, right? And my loans got sold off to a different company because that just happens, I guess. And so that new company, now there used to be a thing called the IDR plan that's now called the SAVE plan. And that's supposed to be the new Biden thing to help people afford stuff. Tell me how I'm making less money now than I was going into the pandemic, and my income-driven SAVE plan payments that were supposed to be better are more than doubled. And those start for me next month. So anyway, so I'm really trying to make my creative passions my future here. And I know sitting on social media is going to do nothing to help me, but it's a fun way to escape from this nightmare, you know? And listen, I don't mean to be bumming anybody out here, okay? And I assume if I have, they've already turned the episode off by now. This is not where I thought this episode was going to go, to be perfectly honest. But I feel like these are things that are real and need to be said. I, don't think I'm the only person who thinks like this and knows that something has to change. And listen, I don't think it's a standpoint of just like asking for handouts. I think it's just like some fucking breathing room, dude. Like, how do you expect anybody to progress in life, especially when like things are as expensive as they are, man? Groceries are like crazy. Also, like, I was thinking about this morning because I'm going to a few concerts this week, and it's just like I'm probably not gonna be able to afford to like get a beer at any of them. And I'm thinking about like, why are the price of a beer at a concert, like, how did we as a society just accept $18 beers at a concert? Like, we just started paying that. I don't know if we like collectively agreed to do stuff together as a society. And I understand that coming off of a beer sale is an interesting way to transition to this, but it goes for anything. Everything I've talked about so far, that if we as a collective society all at once were like, hey, we don't fuck with this. We're not doing this. We're not doing anything you want until this changes. Things would change so easily. And they know that. And that's why they pin the culture war stuff to us. They project it to us through the media and through our social media apps, so that we argue with each other about stuff that is not that important, even though it seems like it is. And it keeps us at each other's throats so that we don't fix what's actually going on. But in terms of an $18 beer, like if everybody at that arena was like, I'm not paying that. We're not buying a single beer until you lower that price. They would lower that price. That's the power that we have. But people are too caught up in their own personal shit to realize that we have that power. And I don't think people even want it. That was a lot that I said. So I'm going to take a second. Let's transition a little bit here, shall we? I thought it would be fun to talk about dating. I'm not a single person, but a lot of my friends are, and I can't help but notice this trend going on of everybody complaining about the dating scene. It seems like people are in the trenches out there. And from an outsider's perspective looking in, it is wild. And I think it really just comes down to a lot of the issues I've been talking about already, but just like our culture. And I think a lot of it has to do with coming out of the pandemic. We're still not that far removed from the pandemic. It seems like it's still a weird transition back into normal society, and I hope that things balance out eventually. I feel like they have to. But from what I can tell, a lot of it, I think, comes from our like instant gratification culture that we're in, right? Like everybody wants the best thing all of the time, right? And I feel like that's Instagram culture, in terms of like how people project themselves and how people perceive that. Like, you see the best version of everybody's life on social media. And I'm not saying anything new here, right? Like, we all do know this, but I think this plays a huge role, because I don't know, I feel like even people posting pictures of their relationships online is like a facade for most people, and maybe it's not, but that's just how I see it. And that's, if you notice, I don't post a lot of like my girlfriend and I, because I think it's weird. I think I'm in a good healthy relationship, and I think that is a factor that plays into it, that it's like we focus on what's real and how like we're actually feeling and like working towards something and building something here. Like that is what you're supposed to do. And I think like social media really fucks with that, you know? And I think a lot of people who post their relationship like all over social media, like as like their brand, like I just can't imagine that is healthy. I'm sure there are some people that just like view it as just how it's supposed to be originally used, social media, like just as a thing to share like with your friends and family. It's just like, oh look, me and my partner did this over the weekend and just wanted to share, right? And I think that's great. You know, I think there are people who do that and they should, you know. But I think the way that I use social media is different. I think the way a lot of people use social, I don't think that's majority of people who are doing that. I think a lot of it is like they want to be perceived a certain way, you know, and to no fault of their own. I'm not blaming people for this. I think this is like what it has done to us is like the brand of how, like it's all about our own personal branding, like whether you want to admit it or not. Now I know it and I accept it, especially as like a creator. I look at my Instagram page, I look at it as like, this is my website for my brand of business as a creator, as a podcaster, musician, comedian, whatever. And like, I don't know, I feel like posting your relationship to like play into that is like gross, and it shouldn't, and it's like superficial, just really superficial. And I think a lot of people, I think that is why like dating, not the main reason, but I think that plays a huge role into why dating seems like a nightmare, because everybody wants things to just work and be good so that you can just like have that picture perfect relationship that you think everybody you follow on social media has, you know? And I think we need to reject that, and we need to talk about that. And nobody wants to do anything hard, it seems like, in a relationship. Like, relationships are hard. They're hard work, you know? You have to make them work. Human beings are complicated, especially in today's world when we like have this crazy hyper awareness, when a lot of us are chronically online. That itself is hard to navigate, right? Plus all of like the socio-political factors I've been talking about this whole episode. Like you throw that in everything, we have these complicated brains that are in a very complicated situation. And I think all of it stems back to like late stage capitalism. Like that's just the world that we've created now. We've gone too far, you know? We don't need this. You know, I love my iPhone. I do, but we don't need it. You know, how did we get to like, we can conveniently do everything on here before we got to like feeding people? You know what I'm saying? Like, isn't that insane? Like access to all of the information in the world in the palm of your hand, we got to before we got to figuring out how to feed people. Like that's just insane to me. And that's like the world that we live in now. I think we need to be aware of that, and we need to have conversations about it. And I don't think dating apps are necessarily a bad thing. Like I think it's great that it makes it easy to connect with people who like you have a mutual attraction for, and are looking for similar things. Like I think that's awesome. And there's, success stories all over the world of how dating apps have helped people find their forever people, you know, and I don't want to ignore that. But I think just a lot of people just are going about it the wrong way, you know? And again, you just want like if it's people run at the first like inconvenience that happens, like as soon as things aren't that picture perfect way you want them to be, you're like, all right, well, that means we're just not meant to be. And it's like, no, that's not how this works. You know, like you have to work towards these things and like work on yourself as well. And I think that's the biggest reflection of it is like, if you're a person who's just always looking for things through rose-colored glasses and ignores like the reality, the mundane of life, then you're just never going to find true happiness. And I think a lot of people are not truly happy because of that reason. This is something that I've realized in myself through like my own personal spiritual journey of growth, is like realizing what you truly value and like just looking inward and building a center, that when you do that, it attracts a partner that's doing the same thing, and you can build something real, you know? And I also think another piece that plays into it is I've noticed, just like, again, as just like a chronically online person, I just like observe all of this. There's like what I've just been calling red flag culture, where the same thing where like I think a lot of people just like turn and run at the first complication, at the first thing you disagree with each other. There's this red flag culture like that I think started as a legit thing. You know what I mean? Like, I think there are legit red flags in people that you should be able to, you know, like avoid a toxic partner, you know, like those are things that should exist, I think. And then it kind of became like a joke, you know, like there was like a meme of it, of these red flags in guys or girls or whatever that like do certain things or like certain things. But then I think a lot of people like actually use that as like a guide in choosing a partner, where it's like, oh, he listens to this podcast or watches this, likes this movie or reads this author or follows this person, and like whatever, like these kinds of things that just like you just create like an image in your head of what a person is based on those things, is just, I think, ridiculous. And it doesn't allow, like, have a conversation about it, you know, and like understand that people are complicated, and like just because of things they're interested in doesn't necessarily mean they're a bad person. I don't know. I don't really know how to fix that, and if that's even like a real thing. It's just a thing that I have seen online that I feel like I just don't think can be good. I don't know. To sum it all up, like instant gratification, red flag culture, rose-colored glasses of life that we've created due to social media. And I think, again, going back to the pandemic, we were just all stuck inside looking at a screen for what felt like forever, you know, and then we came out and forgot that life is not like that. And I feel like that is what's playing into like dating culture now, where like, I don't know, just from what I hear from people, like that, just like what dating has become and just like how much of a nightmare it absolutely seems like. And I think, again, I just think that all plays out to it, that we're all just kind of like struggling with ourselves internally. And in turn, I think like that reflects into like dating and trying to find a partner and stuff. It's like, I just think people are just kind of a mess. And I think people need to focus on like having these conversations and working towards actually building something and accepting people for their flaws and trying to work on that, and not necessarily like rejecting it, you know? But I don't claim to be some sort of guru, you know? I am no messiah, you know? I'm just some dude. And that's the whole point of this entire podcast. So I guess we'll wrap that up there. This one was a doozy, huh? If you made it to the end, thanks a lot. And you're strong. And everything is going to be okay, I think. We'll see you next week.